Have you ever promised yourself that tomorrow everything would be different? That you would wake up early, change your routine, take control of your life, and yet you woke up late again, with that heavy feeling of guilt settling in your chest before you even opened your eyes? Maybe you've heard 1,000 times that successful people start their day before everyone else, that the silence of the early morning is where destinies are built, but every attempt ended the same way, with excuses, exhaustion, and the idea that you were simply not born for that. But what if the problem wasn't your willpower, but the time of day when you try to change your life? What if the story of an ordinary man could show you that the breaking point doesn't happen when everyone is awake, but when almost no one is? This is the story of someone who had absolutely nothing until he decided to claim the first hours of the day as his territory. Stay until the end, because this story might confront you more than you imagine. In a gray city, crossed by long highways and old buildings, lived a man named Daniel, 35 years old, whose life seemed to repeat itself in an endless loop. Daniel worked as a night operator in a security camera monitoring center. His shift began at 9 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m., surrounded by screens, artificial lights, and a heavy silence broken only by the constant hum of the equipment. When he left work, as the city was barely beginning to breathe, Daniel walked to his small rented apartment, a place without personality, with inherited furniture and walls he never bothered to decorate because, deep down, he felt it wasn't worth it. He slept during the day, woke up tired, ate whatever was available, and returned to work with the feeling that his life was moving forward without him. He wasn't lazy. He never was. He kept his schedule, never missed work, did exactly what was asked of him. But with each passing day, he felt like he was trading hours of his life for a minimal stability that led nowhere. As he walked home at dawn, he saw people starting their day with purpose. Rushed executives, students with backpacks, parents taking their children to school, and a question hit him hard. When did I fall behind? He had tried to change. He thought about studying something new, learning a skill, reinventing himself, but the same thing always happened. Exhaustion defeated him, sleep swallowed him, and good intentions died before they even began. One ordinary night, while working, he received a message that pulled him out of autopilot. It was from his father. "Son, we need to talk. I'm sick and I don't want to leave things unfinished." Daniel felt a knot in his stomach. When his shift ended, instead of going to sleep, he took a bus to the town where he had grown up. The trip was long and silent. When he arrived, he found his father thinner, more fragile, with a gaze that mixed exhaustion and clarity. They talked for hours. Before going to sleep, his father said something that stayed with him. "The biggest mistake is not failing. It's getting used to a life that doesn't represent you." That early morning, Daniel went out for a walk. It was 5 a.m. The sky was still dark, the streets empty, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a deep calm. There was no noise, no demands, no external expectations. Just him and the silence. And there, standing in the middle of that stillness, he understood something he had never considered. For years, he had lived reacting, never creating, always arriving late to his own life. In that moment, he made a simple but radical decision. He was going to change his relationship with mornings, no matter the cost. Back in the city, on the bus, he sat next to an older man calmly reading an underlined book. It was someone Daniel had seen before, an independent consultant known for having built several small businesses. Without knowing why, Daniel spoke to him. He asked how he could be so serene at that hour. The man smiled and answered something that unsettled him. "Because my day started hours ago." He explained that he woke up every day at 5 a.m., without exception, not out of obligation, but because it was the only time that truly belonged to him. Daniel listened attentively as the man explained that those early hours weren't for working for others, but for building yourself. That most people try to change their lives when they're already exhausted, when they've already given all their energy to the world, and that's why they fail. Before getting off the bus, the man left him with a phrase that resonated deeply. "If you don't decide who you are before the world wakes up, the world will decide for you." When he got home, Daniel didn't go straight to bed like always. He adjusted his routine. He decided to sleep fewer hours, but with intention. That same week, he started his experiment. Every day, no matter how tired he was, he woke up at 5 a.m. The first mornings were brutal. His body protested. His mind searched for excuses. Everything inside him wanted to quit. But he forced himself to sit at a small table with an old notebook and his computer. During the first hour, he learned basic programming, data analysis, skills he never thought he could master. During the second hour, he walked, reflected, wrote, and organized his mind. Days passed, then weeks. Something began to change. Not outside, but inside. Daniel no longer felt like a victim of circumstances. He felt control. He felt direction. While the world slept, he moved forward. After 2 months, he could already create simple projects. After 3, he began offering freelance services. By the 6th, he left the night shift. A year later, his life wasn't perfect, but it was his. Today, Daniel still wakes up at 5 a.m. Not because someone tells him to, but because he understood a simple and powerful truth. It's not about waking up early. It's about claiming the only moment of the day where you can decide who you are becoming. And now the question is for you. Tomorrow, when your alarm goes off, will you keep negotiating with the version of yourself that keeps you stuck? Or will you get up and start building the life you say you want? Because no one is going to do it for you. And the silence of the early morning is still waiting. The silence of the early morning is still waiting. And it does so every day, patient, intact, without judging how many times you decided to ignore it. Daniel understood this over time, because after the first year of transformation came an even deeper truth. Waking up early was not the goal, it was just the door. The real difference began when he stopped using those hours to escape his old life and started using them to intentionally design the person he wanted to be in 5, 10, 20 years. Every morning at 5 a.m., Daniel sat by the window with a cup of hot coffee while the city was still asleep. He no longer felt tired, he felt clarity. He used that time to review his goals, adjust decisions, study markets, understand how businesses work, how real value is built, and why most people remain stuck not because of a lack of talent, but because of a lack of direction. He understood that when you master your mornings, you stop living defensively and start living strategically. Over time, unexpected opportunities began to appear. People noticed his focus, his discipline, his ability to think calmly. Daniel didn't talk much about his routine. He didn't preach it, he embodied it. While others complained about exhaustion, the system, bad luck, he had already done his internal work before the day began. And it showed. His decisions were firmer, his boundaries clearer, his energy different. One day, someone asked him what had really changed in his life. Daniel thought for a moment before answering and said something simple. I stopped asking exhaustion for permission to build my future, because that was what really happened every time he woke up at 5 a.m. He wasn't fighting sleep, he was training his identity. He was proving, first to himself, that he could keep a daily promise, even when no one was watching. Over the years, Daniel understood that most people wait to feel motivated to change, but motivation is unstable. It depends on mood, weather, circumstances. Discipline, on the other hand, is built in silence, in repetition, in those small decisions that seem insignificant but, accumulated, transform an entire life. Waking up early didn't make him special. It made him consistent, and consistency applied for long enough is unstoppable. Today, when Daniel walks through the city at dawn, he sees others doing what he used to do years ago, walking aimlessly, tired, resigned. He doesn't judge them. He knows exactly how they feel. He knows how easy it is to surrender to the snooze button. He knows how comfortable it is to say, I'll start tomorrow. But he also knows something most haven't discovered yet. That the moment you decide to get up, when everything inside you wants to stay, is the same moment you begin to lead your own life. And now, this story is not just about Daniel. It's about you. Because tomorrow, when the world is still silent and your alarm rings, you'll have a simple but powerful choice. You can keep living the same repeated day, hoping something external changes, or you can get up and use those first hours to become someone who no longer needs to wait. No one will applaud you at 5 a.m. No one will see you, and that's exactly why it works. Because that's where lives that seem impossible from the outside are built. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming conscious. Conscious that every morning is a vote for the life you want or the life you tolerate. The silence, the darkness, the slow sunrise. Everything is on your side if you choose to use it. Daniel did it without advantages, without connections, without guarantees. Just with a decision repeated day after day. And if he could do it with everything against him, the real question is not whether you can. The question is whether you are willing to stop postponing the person you know you can become. Tomorrow, when your alarm rings, remember this. It's not just one more hour of sleep at stake. It's the direction of your life. The world will remain the same whether you wake up or not. But you won't. You can be different. The sunrise is already ready. Now decide if you are too. The sunrise is already ready, but most people never look at it head-on. Daniel understood this because, over time, he began to notice a silent separation between two types of people. Those who react to life and those who build it before it begins. It wasn't a visible difference in clothes, money, or words. It was an internal difference, almost invisible, that manifested in the calm with which they faced problems and the clarity with which they made decisions when everything seemed uncertain. Over the years, Daniel began carrying a notebook he never left behind. It wasn't a common journal. It was a map. Every morning at 5 a.m., he wrote who he was being and who he needed to become. He wrote down mistakes without justifying them, correct decisions without excessive pride, and goals without fear. That simple exercise forced him to face himself before facing the world. He discovered that most external conflicts are born from unresolved internal conversations, and that resolving them at dawn gave him an advantage no one could take away during the day. Little by little, his life began to align. Not because everything went right, but because even when something failed, Daniel no longer collapsed. He had an internal structure. He knew how to return to center. Mornings became his anchor. While others sought distractions to escape discomfort, he used discomfort as a signal of growth. He understood that feeling uncomfortable waking up early wasn't punishment. It was a boundary. And every time he crossed it, he left behind an old version of himself. There were difficult days, of course. Days when bills piled up, when he doubted, when it seemed like all that effort led nowhere. But even on those days, Daniel got up. Not because he felt strong, but because he had learned something essential. You don't need to feel strong to act. You need to act to become strong. That truth, repeated in silence every morning, sustained him when motivation disappeared. Over time, younger people began seeking him out for advice. They asked what the trick was, what the secret habit was, what the exact formula was. Daniel always answered the same way, with a serenity only experience gives. There is no trick. There are only small decisions made when no one is watching. He told them that waking up early wouldn't automatically make them successful, but it would give them something far more valuable: control over their identity. Because whoever controls their identity controls their destiny. Daniel also learned to respect rest, to care for his body, to understand that discipline is not punishment, it is coherence. Going to bed early stopped being a limitation and became a declaration of priorities. While others extended the night consuming distractions, he closed the day with intention, knowing that every well-closed night made a powerful morning easier. He understood that the true luxury is not sleeping late, but waking up with purpose. And so, year after year, Daniel continued building. Not explosively, but solidly. Not seeking external validation, but internal stability. His mornings remained simple. Silence, writing, learning, movement. But the cumulative effect of those silent hours was extraordinary. His life began to reflect the person he trained every dawn. It wasn't luck. It was coherence sustained over time. Now, as you read this, there's something important you need to know. You don't need to change your entire life today. You don't need to understand everything. You just need to decide one thing: what time you're going to start respecting yourself. Because waking up early is not an act against sleep. It's an act in favor of your future. It's telling yourself every morning that your life matters enough to begin with intention. Tomorrow, when silence wraps everything again and most are still asleep, you'll once again have the opportunity. No one will force you. No one will watch you. But you will know whether you chose to move forward or stay where you are. And that choice, repeated day after day, is what ultimately defines who you are. The sunrise does not judge. It only waits. The sunrise does not judge, it only waits, and Daniel learned that this silent waiting was actually a daily invitation to go even deeper within himself, because the more he advanced externally, the more he understood that the real work had never been changing his life, but changing his level of consciousness. And that doesn't happen suddenly. It happens slowly, like the sun that rises without making noise but ends up illuminating everything. Over time, Daniel began to notice something unsettling and revealing at the same time. Many people wanted the results he was building, but almost none wanted his process. They wanted calm, stability, clarity, but not the uncomfortable silence of early mornings, not discipline without applause, not consistency when there was no immediate proof of progress. And then he understood that most people don't fail due to lack of ability, but due to lack of patience with themselves, because they want quick transformation to avoid facing their own internal inconsistencies. Every morning, when the clock marked 5 a.m., Daniel felt like he entered a space that didn't belong to ordinary time. It was a different mental territory, where artificial urgencies, comparisons, and the noise of others' expectations didn't exist. In that space, he could think deeply, question past decisions without guilt, and design future decisions without fear. He discovered that the quality of his thinking at dawn was radically different from any other time of day, as if his mind were less contaminated by the world and more connected to what truly mattered. He also learned to observe himself with brutal honesty. In those early hours, there were no distractions to escape himself. If he was confused, he felt it. If he was avoiding something important, it became exposed. But far from being a punishment, that became an advantage. Because facing internal truth early prevented it from manifesting later as anxiety, frustration, or impulsive decisions. Daniel understood that most people live accumulating emotional tension throughout the day because they never stop to organize their inner world before stepping out into the world. Over the years, Daniel stopped measuring success solely in economic terms. Of course, there was material progress, stability, opportunities, but what he valued most was something money couldn't buy: the feeling of coherence. Saying what he thought, doing what he said, keeping small promises every day. That internal coherence became a source of solid self-esteem, not inflated, not dependent on external recognition. And that self-esteem was the foundation of everything else. There were moments when life tested him in unexpected ways. Projects that didn't turn out as expected. People who drifted away when he stopped being accommodating. Difficult decisions that meant letting go of seemingly more comfortable paths. But even in those moments, Daniel held onto his morning ritual. Because he understood something fundamental. When everything is unstable outside, you need a fixed point inside. And his mornings were that fixed point. As the world accelerated, Daniel learned to slow down internally. He didn't react immediately. He didn't respond from impulse. He thought. He observed. He chose. That ability for conscious response was trained every dawn. When he mentally reviewed his emotions, intentions, and boundaries, he discovered that true maturity doesn't consist of knowing a lot, but of knowing how to pause before acting. And that internal pause is built when you have real spaces of silence in your life. Over time, Daniel began to understand that waking up early wasn't just a personal practice, but a form of silent resistance against a world that constantly pushes toward distraction, urgency, and automatic consumption. Every morning at 5 a.m. was an invisible declaration. Not all my time will be devoured by external stimuli. Not all my energy will be reactive. Not all my life will be improvised. It was a way of reclaiming personal sovereignty. Observing those around him, Daniel noticed that many people confused freedom with lack of structure, when in reality true freedom is born from consciously chosen structure. His routine didn't enslave him. It freed him. It gave him clarity, internal predictability, mental space. While others felt trapped by chaotic schedules and fluctuating emotional states, he had a daily anchor that brought him back to himself no matter what happened. Each sunrise reinforced a simple but powerful idea. You don't need to control the world to feel safe. You need to learn how to direct yourself. And that self-direction is trained in moments without external pressure, when no one demands anything, when only you decide whether you follow through or not. That's why those hours were so transformative. Because there were no believable excuses. You either got up or you didn't. You either acted or you didn't, and every choice left an invisible mark on your identity. Daniel began to see his life as a long-term construction, not a sprint. He stopped obsessing over comparisons, other people's timelines, external narratives of success. He understood that everyone has their own rhythm, but real progress requires consistent direction. And that direction is best defined when noise is minimal. That's why dawn was so powerful, because no one was competing with you at that hour. It was just you facing your decisions. As the years passed, Daniel began to feel a different kind of responsibility. Not to convince others, but to be a silent example of what is possible when someone decides to take themselves seriously. He knew not everyone was ready. He knew many would hear the idea of waking up early, nod, and then return to the same habits. And that was okay, because real change isn't imposed. It's chosen, and it's only chosen when the pain of staying the same outweighs the fear of changing. Many mornings, as the sky slowly began to brighten, Daniel thought about his past self, the one who walked tired and directionless, feeling like life was moving without him. He didn't feel shame, he felt compassion. He knew that version did what it could with the level of consciousness it had. And he also knew that without that initial discomfort, he would never have sought something different. He understood that discomfort isn't always an enemy. Sometimes it's a signal that you can no longer continue being who you were. And now, as you read these lines, perhaps something inside you is also shifting. Maybe a slight discomfort, maybe resistance, maybe a silent question. Don't ignore it. You don't need to answer it today. Just observe it. Because that's the same sensation Daniel had before changing his routine, before changing his life. It wasn't an epic moment. It was a silent decision made when no one was watching. Tomorrow, when the clock marks an early hour and the world is still wrapped in stillness, you'll have an opportunity that doesn't seem important. But it is. It's not about heroism. It's not about perfection. It's about presence. About choosing to be awake when you could stay asleep, not just physically but mentally. Because many people are awake all day and still live asleep. The sunrise doesn't promise immediate results. It doesn't sell miracles. It doesn't guarantee fast success. All it offers is space. Space to think better, to decide better, to build better. And that space used consistently ends up changing everything. Not because the sunrise is magical, but because you start becoming different within it. So when your alarm rings tomorrow, remember this. You're not fighting sleep. You're training self-respect. You're sending a silent message to your mind that says, my life matters enough to begin with intention. And that message, repeated day after day, becomes identity. And identity over time becomes destiny. The silence will still be there. The sunrise too. The only variable is you. And the decision, as always, will be made in solitude. But you won't be lost. You'll be, for the first time, beginning to find yourself. The sunrise will continue arriving every day, but Daniel's story needed a closing. Not because the process ended, but because he had reached a point where he was no longer the same man who began waking up at 5 a.m. out of desperation, but someone who deeply understood why he would never go back. Over the years, Daniel stopped counting time in months or visible achievements and began measuring his life by something more subtle. The level of coherence between what he thought, what he felt, and what he did. And that coherence was born, sustained, and strengthened in the silent hours of dawn. Daniel understood that the real transformation was not moving from one job to another, nor improving his income, nor gaining recognition, but learning how to lead himself when no one was watching. He learned that most people fail not because they don't know what to do, but because they never train the ability to sustain an uncomfortable decision long enough for it to become identity. He did, not once, not when he felt motivated. He did it thousands of times every morning when his body asked for rest and his mind offered perfectly reasonable excuses. Over the years, Daniel began to feel a different kind of peace. Not the peace of someone without problems, but the peace of someone who trusts their ability to face them. He no longer needed to run from silence or fill it with external noise. On the contrary, he sought it, because in that silence he found answers that didn't appear during the day, when the world demanded speed, opinions, and immediate reactions. In the early morning, Daniel could clearly hear his intuition, that inner voice that only speaks when everything else goes quiet. There came a moment when Daniel understood something final. Waking up early hadn't changed his life because of the hour itself, but because it taught him to respect himself, to respect his word, to keep small promises, to not depend on mood to act. And that self-respect filtered into every area of his life. In how he chose relationships, in how he said no without guilt, in how he accepted challenges without feeling inferior, in how he let go of what was no longer aligned, even when it hurt. Daniel also understood that not everyone is meant to wake up at 5 a.m., but everyone is meant to find a daily space where they can meet themselves before giving themselves to the world. For him, it was dawn. For others, it may be another time. But the principle is the same. If you don't create a conscious space to build yourself, the world will build you by default and almost never in your favor. Over the years, Daniel stopped talking about habits and started talking about identity, because he understood that no one sustains a habit for long if it isn't aligned with the person they believe they are. He no longer woke up early to improve his life. He woke up early because that was the kind of person he had become. Someone who doesn't negotiate with their future. Someone who understands that real progress is silent, slow, and deeply personal. There was one specific day that sealed all of this. An ordinary dawn, nothing special. Daniel sat by the window as always and realized something simple but final. He was no longer chasing a better life. He was already living it. Not because everything was perfect, but because he no longer felt disconnected from himself. He no longer lived waiting for the weekend, vacations, or someday. He lived present, and that presence was true success. Daniel then remembered the man he once was, walking tired at dawn without understanding why he felt empty. And he understood that no one had rescued him. There were no miracles. There were no shortcuts. Just one decision repeated with discipline over years. And that filled him with deep gratitude, because he understood that anyone, at any point in their life, can begin in the same way, by claiming a small daily space to stop surviving and start building. Today, Daniel still wakes up early. He doesn't do it out of obligation or fear of regressing, but because that moment became his internal home. That's where he thinks. That's where he adjusts. That's where he remembers who he is and where he's going. And he knows that as long as he preserves that space, he'll be able to move through any stage of life without losing himself. And now this story closes with you, because it's not about Daniel. It's about what this story awakened in you. Maybe it was discomfort, maybe inspiration, maybe resistance. Whatever it was, don't ignore it, because that reaction is a sign that something inside you knows it's time to change how you begin your days, and therefore, how you're living your life. You don't need to do it perfectly. You don't need to do it forever. You just need to start. Choose a moment. Choose a space. Choose yourself. Because time will pass anyway. The sunrise will come anyway. The only difference will be who you decide to be when that happens. The story ends here, but the decision begins tomorrow. And this time, it doesn't depend on anyone else. It depends on you.